Greetings. Welcome to my first podcast ever. My name is Ken. I'm a physical therapist, and I practice and I live here in Southern California. I wanted to share a story with you because I recently got back from a military union, and it's from Marines that I served with well over 20 years ago. And during that time, one of the guys who was a machine gunner of mine found out what I do as a career, and he thought that I'd get a kick out of seeing a couple of pictures that he showed me. So here they are, and I want to thank Dan for consenting to be able to share his story, because he found out that it might help a few of my colleagues and also some patients that might be out there and clients. So again, Dan, thank you for losing a little bit of beauty sleep. I called him up 2 times to do a phone interview, and I really wish that you could have heard his story from his own words. But because I can't figure out some of this stuff just yet, I wasn't able to have him tell his story over the phone. So there are a couple of points I wanted to bring up. Now, important points I wanted to share is that Dan is a martial artist. You know, he practiced jiu-jitsu and also kickboxing. And while he was doing a roll in jiu-jitsu, his foot had gotten caught on the mat, and it ended up pulling it out of place. Now, his wife happened to also be there, and when she saw that it was out of place, right away she wanted to put it back into place and just sort of pull it and just stick it back in there. Now, as soon as that happened later on, when they got to the emergency room, Dan had mentioned that the toe just began bleeding profusely. So, point well taken. If you see something out of place, I know it's family and I know it's friends, and I know you want to try to help and fix things, especially if you got to wait 45 minutes for an ambulance to get there. But just leave it alone until the professionals are able to get to it, because it could have turned into an emergency situation where he could have been losing quite a bit of blood while at the gym. Now, Dan had mentioned that the anesthesia injection that he received was 100 times more powerful or more painful than the actual dislocation of his foot and everything else that went on about it. In fact, he said he didn't really have any pain whatsoever, and I thought that was interesting. But he also mentioned that the person that the physician that was working with him that reduced his toe and all was a butcher. And he didn't have any care in the world, didn't even really connect with him. And there's also a couple of papers that show how important it is for us as clinicians to make that connection with our clients. And I know that we don't have a whole lot of time in our hands because of all the cutbacks and all the time constraints, but I think it's really important that we have to make time. It's not necessarily our skill. Patients don't necessarily care about what we know until we know that we end up caring in there. So Dan didn't need any physical therapy. He did some aggressive stretching on his own. He ended up going back to kickboxing, and I felt really good about him facing his fears and going back to jiu-jitsu, where he ended up hurting himself. So when I showed this picture to a couple of my colleagues, they all cringed. Probably same facial expression I had when I first saw it. And a lot of people were surprised that he didn't really feel any pain throughout the entire experience, except for just the anesthesia shot. Now, I asked him, why do you think that was the case with you, Dan? And he had mentioned that, being a martial artist and a previous Marine, maybe he's just an extra tough guy. And I thought that was a really wonderful insight for him to bring up, only because there's a couple of other things that we can do to be able to change a pain experience. If something is really excruciating, you're suffering from it, it doesn't necessarily have to deal with just the anatomy, the severity of the injury, the amount of bones that are sometimes sticking out, and how much grinding that ends up happening in a joint. That's all poorly correlated with having a pain experience. This may be my first podcast and possibly my last if I can't figure out these apps. But I just thought that I'd give it a stab, only because I felt that it might help some other people out here, and I hope that you were able to get something out of it.